So I'm Eric Giordano. I'm head of business development at Next Atlas, and this is one of the many focuses that we do for EQIP to analyze what's going on in public conversations in cultural and creative industries about specific topic. Today, speaking about fashion transition, eco-design for circularity. What we do as a process and what you will see as a result of our analysis starts from our methodology, which is a combination of data scientists and insight strategists, which means that our team is composed by people that on one end are detecting the right sources to analyze topics regarding a certain area, and of course providing the statistics and analytics. And on the other hand, insight strategists, as Deborah Bayer, that will guide us today in this topic, that read through this data and translate them into readable insights. We do this by analyzing particularly social media, not only, but this is the main area and focus of a source of our analysis. We balance different sources because, of course, it's important to keep pace with the change of also of these sources for time and to see where people and creatives in this case are going. Our objective, as always, is discovering weak signals before they go mainstream, so detecting phenomena before they reach a larger scale, but also, on the other hand, understanding what's their evolution once they have been detected and established. So also the continuous monitoring is one of our tasks. For these specific projects, we are looking into 4 different data sources, which are YouTube, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and Behance. And of course, all the analyses that we do are compliant with GDPR. So, as usual, this presentation is divided into 3 steps. So the first one is very short, is the one in which we introduce the community that we are observing and how we did this work, and then we enter into the topic, looking at fashion transition. So looking in this case at the clusters of topics that we will have detected for this area. And finally, we will see one of the trends that we detect on Next Atlas. So based on this ongoing observation of more than 300,000 early adopters at global level. So enoughness era is one of these trends, and what we will see regarding to these trends and all the analytics are so global and not only refer to the cultural and creative industry, but they may have an important impact for European culture CCIs. Starting with how we build this community. This is the process that we're not going into much detail, but just to give you some tips about how we create and curate and update this community. We start the user detection by looking at the people and profiles that have already been detected for the ongoing observation that we do in Next Atlas, but then enlarging to have to contacts, to people that is commenting specific topics, to people that is presenting themselves as a part of CCIs. It's important, of course, the filter in this moment, the beginning of the process, because of course there can be profiles that are inactive or profiles that are not clearly localized in European countries, and in this case we wanted to create a community to observe specifically focused in Europe. We also looked at regional pertinence of these people, so to see that they are balanced somehow between the different areas of Europe, and also and we understood what is the part of the industry that they are sub-industry in CCIs that they are pertaining. Content exploration is the second step. So once the community is set, and as I said, is always updated, and a major update will be done at the beginning of the next summer again. But once this community is set and updated, we analyze what these people are publishing on their social media, and looking at a specific content, we have 2 ways to detect the topics that are emerging. So on one end, it's a top-down clustering. So we have some hypotheses that we want to, and areas of interest, such as the one that we are seeing today related to fashion transition, and we want to see what's going on in debate about an area that we decide. But on the other hand, we do also bottom-up clustering, which means that the content that is created by people is analyzed in a way that it can lead to clusters that are the one that we will see in today's report. In the preparatory phase, we detect not only together with our partners in EQIP, not only the topic to be analyzed, but also what are the keywords and what are some of the specific concepts that are part of to see what's going on and how the concept conversation
Eric,
is.
we cannot hear you anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And
I
I
Okay,
think
I
we
hear
can
some
hear
noise. Yeah,
Deborah's
yeah, there's some
audio.
noise there.
Okay,
Okay,
now we can.
can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we were speaking about the methodology in the preparatory phases. I was saying not only we together with our partners in EQIP we detect what is the area that we want to investigate, but also we detect a list of keywords and concepts that are hypotheses of the topics that will be discussed more. But on the other end, we also have this clustering that is automated clustering that allows us to see not only what we have hypothesized, but also specific topics that may emerge spontaneously from a conversation. There's the data filtering because, of course, some of them may be not much relevant or trivial, but the result of this analysis, what you will see, and is the list of concepts and clusters that emerge together with their data analysis. The report, of course, includes a qualitative evaluation because it's important to read through these clusters and see what they are telling us. So every time the system detects a new cluster or conversation, we see what's inside, and we describe them also by looking at the data analysis. And finally, as I anticipated, we correlate one of the trends of next atlas that is most relevant to this area. The regional distribution of the profiles that we observed, as you can see, is quite balanced compared with the population of the 4 different areas in which Europe is divided. We also have an analysis about how CCIs are represented. Of course, some of them are most represented because they are more vocal also on social media, and some of them also because they are a bit cross-industry, such as books and publishing and audiovisual. And the same distribution is also analyzed by looking at every region in Europe. So I leave the floor to Deborah that can guide us through the topic of today. Deborah, we
cannot hear you.
Sorry, is it better now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I'm sharing my screen, so there's some technical issues going on. As I was saying, welcome everybody. As my colleagues were saying, this is a deep dive on fashion transition. More specifically, we'll be talking about eco-design for circularity. And what we're doing here is, as you could have sensed from Eric, is a social media listening with a very focused, curated community. So the intention here is to kind of flesh out conversations that are being vocalized by creative and cultural practitioners to see where their interest is lying on, where they're showing concerns, or maybe where also they are showing more of a positive tone as well, more optimism. As we look at this timeline of conversations on social media around this topic, we see a rather, I would say, stable popularity. But there's this noticeable spike here in, I would say, mid-April, and it aligns with the World Circular Economy Forum. It was held in Brussels, if I am not mistaken. And it's interesting to see how even these events, they can act as a catalyst for attention and conversation, even if it's for a brief moment. But as you can see, overall, it's what I would say it's a stable popularity. So it means that people are constantly talking about it without a specific growth over time, but it's a topic that has been consolidating over the past years. This word cloud, it really helps us map the conversations emerging around circularity and eco-design. What's important to note is how the discourse is no longer just about the final product, but increasingly about the systems and the process behind it. So for example, in this first cluster, where you see it on the top left of your screen, we're seeing keywords like eco-design, circular model, repairability, and cradle to cradle. Those are all terms that kind of emphasize a shift toward designing with the entire life circle in mind. And it's not just about the point of sale. So we're talking about how it's being made, but most importantly, how it's being discarded as well. And just a small note for those who are not familiar with the expression cradle to cradle. It's a philosophy that I'm very fond of because, well, basically it encourages the creation of products with materials that can either safely return to nature or be endlessly reused. And I kind of like the idea because it's not rigid. So it's not that we are aiming just for materials that can go back to nature, but we are also opening the doors to something that is reusable. Now, this is the type of keywords that really kind of sets the tone about how we are moving. So there's a lot of emphasis on waste management and what is happening after that first life cycle of a product. It also shows that circularity is not really a solution, but it's more of a transition involving product development. We're talking about supply chain. We're talking about even consumer behavior, which is incredibly interesting, and technological innovation, which all of them kind of have to work together. So this is very important. And I think these four clusters, they shed light in this very important insight, which is all of this have to work together in a very harmonious way in order to make it right. Which makes everything very complex. I do understand how much this topic can be very, very complex because there's so many stakeholders, there's so much scrutiny in the topic, but let's deep dive on each and every cluster. Now, I imagine you could have sensed a little bit from how we positioned the keywords, but just as a matter of organization, we divided this presentation, but also the analysis into 4 clusters. They're interconnected, of course, because we're talking about a very complex issue, right? Everything, as I said, that has to kind of walk together. But the first one we'll be talking about circular and sustainable process. It's a cluster that I would say it's slightly broader as an approach. We're talking about a topic that is slightly broader compared to the other ones. And we'll be, talking a little bit about sustainable processes. Cluster B, supply chain, very important. Now more than ever, I guess. But the focus here will be more on transparency and responsibility, with conversations about traceability, local manufacturing, which is really, really interesting, and everything that different stakeholders are trying to build towards a more resilient ecosystem. Then we'll be moving to cluster C, where we'll be talking about consumer education. I think out of the 4 clusters. This is the one that I found more interesting, but because those are the things that we know, but it was interesting to see these issues being vocalized on social media. Basically, here we're saying that circularity is not just operational, but it's also behavioral. It means that there's this need for better informed consumers, and there's this rising of conscious consumption, but even that kind of comes with challenges. And finally, we talk about digital tools and data impact. All these technologies like digital passports, blockchain, everything that has this tech backbone going on, and how it is impacting the fashion world. Now, let's start with cluster A. Cluster A, which focuses on circularity and sustainable processes. It's a cluster that captures a broader shift. As I was saying, I feel like it's a broader approach to the topic. But it kind of goes beyond product innovation. We're not really talking just about product innovation. We are actually looking at the very systems behind how things are made and are used. There are terms like I was saying before, eco-design, circular model. They're all at the center. But what's interesting, it's also the presence of process-related terms. So we saw repairability, cradle to cradle, as I was explaining before. Very interesting. There is, of course, the data behind this cluster. Looking at this data, we see a strong regional activity in Northern and Southern Europe, which includes Turkey in our analysis. Among the top cultural and creative industries, we see sectors like fashion and design, which are actually part of visual arts, as you see as the top CCI. But we also see like cultural heritage and architecture standing out, which was interesting. It kind of caught my attention when we were doing the analysis. So cultural heritage made a lot of sense also because of the conversations that we've been seeing even on our platform about how traditional craftsmanship and really long-standing practices they're being reinterpreted through a sustainability lens. Quite interesting. And then architecture as well. And we went through a little bit of we went through the data. We were trying to figure out how architecture was this high as well. And we kind of found out something interesting that all this attention on sustainable interiors, when we're talking about eco textiles, when we're using furniture, curtains, workspaces, everywhere you can find, everywhere you can think of textiles being used in interiors. So even there, we're seeing a lot of interest. And of course, there are sectors like advertising and marketing. They are increasingly shaping the narrative around sustainability. This is quite important. This is something that we'll be seeing throughout the deck as well. Basically, how brands are communicating their commitments, and of course, how through that they actually can influence consumer perception. For those who are not really familiar with how we deep dive in these social media conversations, we look at the data at a higher level, but we also go look at the conversations that are emerging, because we do believe they're always like very interesting nuances to kind of flesh out from those conversations. So this is what we did here. We always bring the key concepts and tags, so we can kind of give you an idea of the most relevant emerging concepts within this cluster. What clearly emerges from this cluster is this idea that circularity on its own, it is not really enough without rethinking the production logic behind fashion. So because if we're not thinking about this logic, we're basically just, dressing the same system, but with greener clothes, I guess. It's a heavy criticism, but it's true. And that's why there's a growing call to pair circular businesses models with a deeper paradigm shift, one that directly tackles overproduction. So overproduction is something that emerge a lot in the analysis. This is echoed in the online conversations. If you go through the example of post that we present here, we see how creatives, practitioners in the creative and cultural industries, they are pointing out how fast fashion space has outstripped human capacity. So design cycles, they are relentless, and market expectations, they are pushing volume over value. There's also what I call like a healthy skepticism toward secondhand fashion, especially when it kind of becomes a cover for the same overproduction mindset. Basically, here the idea is that secondhand, great. In the past years, kind of had a boom. Everybody was happy about it because it felt like a good solution. But even there, we are seeing problems because we're still buying it, right? And even if you go to secondhand shops, you often see actually products that come from fast fashion companies. So the problem kind of continues to persist, and the creatives are being very vocal about it, very concerned about it, because they say we need a more structural change, and something that tackles all phases, all steps of the process, especially when it comes to waste management. Remember when I was talking about cradle to cradle, that philosophy of how you can actually discard your clothes. So there's a lot of light being shed on how we make it, but what happens to this cloth throughout time. Does it get a second life? And when you get it, what happens? What is the third, fourth life? Is there a third or fourth life? Or when there's a second life, it goes to a landfill and then it comes and it's impossible to recycle. So there's a lot of how would I say critics concerns about it, but it's really telling that the sentiment, so we also run a sentiment analysis, it's not really negative. It's predominantly positive, and it's not because the issue is solved, but because the conversations is maturing. This is what we sensed when we looked at the data. There's a greater awareness. Critics are really sharp, but there's this willingness to push for systemic change. Everybody wants change, which is quite interesting. Now, looking at the cluster B, we shift the focus from design to infrastructure. So specifically, the supply chain. This cluster brings to light one of the biggest challenges in circular fashion, which is transparency. Despite growing investments in sustainability and everybody trying to kind of create awareness and stuff, there's often this gap between what brands claim and the reality on the ground, especially when it comes to reintegrating materials and ensuring traceability. There's this disconnect between marketing narratives and operational truths. And this is becoming a critical point of discussion, as we'll be seeing in the highlights of this cluster. When we look at regional engagement, Northern Europe stands out once again as the top engaged region. In terms of cultural and creative industries, of course, we always see visual arts. Again, as I said, fashion is part of that, so it makes total sense. But we see here a bigger role being played by advertising, marketing. Of course, it's all about how you're communicating your efforts. What's clear from this cluster is that, well, ambition without clarity leads to confusion. There's a lot of course, a lot of fashion brands that, honestly, almost all of them, they kind of aim to report what they're doing for sustainability, right? Even now, every time I go look into a website of a fashion brand, I see there's something being mentioned about sustainability. But, it's not always. Actually, it's very hard to find clear definitions and understand what the brand means, what the brand means with sustainability, and how it could be measurable, how it could be verifiable. Actually, there's this vagueness, and it's a vagueness that opens the door to what we call the greenwashing. And of course, it masks deeper challenges around sourcing and waste management. There's a really concrete example here, the third post that you see in your screen. There's a problem in waste management. So basically, the post is saying brands, they may claim their products are recyclable or made from recycled content, but practitioners, so people who are actually working at this phase of the process, they are actually telling a different story. What the post is saying is that only about 4 to 5% of products are truly mono material and easily recyclable. That's a very, very low number. The rest typically is composed of mixed materials, and they are frequently clogging or disrupting recycling systems, which of course undermines the very circularity that they promote. So there's a huge issue here because there's a lot of regulation on being clear on how something is sourced, but when it comes to how something needs to be managed at the waste level, well, things get a little bit, vague. As I was saying, the cluster C, the one that talks about consumer education, the one that I found personally more interesting, we talk about how educating consumers is increasingly seen as a key to achieving sustainable fashion. But the conversation is more complex than just raising awareness. So we're seeing a paradox. Now, people are more aware than ever about environmental and ethical issues. I think that's a given. But at the same time, ultra fashion, fast fashion continues to thrive. So there's the paradox, right? People are more aware, but economy is booming in that sense. So it really reveals a deeper truth. And the truth is that awareness alone is really not enough. So to shift these behaviors, we also kind of need a cultural, emotional, and financial accessibility. The fashion industry's influence here goes beyond production. We are talking about an active role in shaping consumer values. In terms of regional relevance, Northern Europe here, once again, is a front runner. This is where we see a lot of engagement around fast fashion criticism, a lot about creating awareness, but the right type of awareness. We see education rising to the top, and it shows how the importance of learning institutions, and it could be schools, it could be informal communities. How can they play key roles in the sustainability dialogue? This is quite important. And then, of course, we see the other industries, but my intention was to highlight the importance of educating consumers. But then also there's a little bit of of complexity. Well, this slide, it captures really well the emotional tension behind sustainable choices. So consumers already know sustainability is better. That's a given. But that doesn't always translate into action. There's a split identity, I would call, and that's emerging. So there's a desire for conscious consumption. But there's also, the part of convenience and low prices of fashion, fast fashion. It's true. Even if I want to adopt a highly sustainable lifestyle, maybe fast fashion costs a little bit less, and for my budget, this is what I can do. So in online conversations, we hear calls for protests, but we also hear doubts. People are not really sure. Well, people are questioning whether consumers, they actually want to be educated, or by now they're just tired. They are overwhelmed by contradictions, which is very, very insightful as a comment. Do consumers want to be even more aware about sustainability? I would say yes, but after all these years, it also became so much overwhelming, and one information does not match the other. It depends on the sources. It depends who is talking about it or not. So from a consumer point of view, the scenario is complex, it's overwhelming, and it's hard to navigate. Maybe the choice that you did yesterday, today, with the new information, you're not sure anymore. So there's a neutral sentiment here, and this is not apathy. I would say it's more like a friction. It shows how difficult it is to align values and habits in this system that still rewards overconsumption. Finally, the cluster D, we focus on the impact of digitalization in fashion's transition. Tools like digital product passports, they are gaining traction. But in this scenario, businesses, they are facing a dual challenge. Not only adopting new technologies is a challenge, of course, but also aligning with evolving regulations. Nothing is 100% clear there, so it's also a challenge there. And it's true that there are a few pioneers that are embracing system-wide collaboration, but the reality is that many still operate in a very fragmented, opaque ecosystem. Everything's so vague as well. And there's a lack of infrastructure for traceability at scale. So this shift is rarely visible to end consumers, but we know that this is essential for building accountability and enabling sustainability. And we do need to place fashion industry in a close collaboration with IT and regulatory sectors. Looking at the data, we see actually a strong regional relevance in Central and Eastern Europe, followed by Southern regions and Turkey. And this may reflect where the push for digital compliances is more active or even necessary. And notably, we see gaming and IT being together. And it kind of highlights the technical backbone of this transition, of course. Looking at the conversations, we see that the rollout of digitalization and data impact is actually sparking rich conversation. But especially among small businesses, I think this was the interesting part of this cluster, this final cluster. The small businesses. So many described the transition as daunting, very, very challenging, because complex tech is hard to understand, of course, and there are a lot of regulatory demands. But there's also optimism, which is really interesting. So for smaller producers, digital tools are not just about compliance. When made well and put in place in the right way, it actually offers a chance to show the story behind each item. So you can talk about the people involved, the process involved, the materials involved. If you think about it, in an industry often dominated by opacity, and I'm talking about fashion, this type of storytelling builds trust and gives ethical makers a way to differentiate. So it's almost as if we are not looking at it only with the sustainability lens anymore, but we are using it as a medium to connect with clients with another level. We are building a relationship, because the more I talk about my product, the end consumer understands the value behind it. So, using digital tools, not just for transparency, to say my business is doing everything right whenever it's possible, but value creation, connection with consumers. And together, these 4 clusters that we saw so far, they actually give us a multifaceted view of fashion's circular transition. It's very complex, I know, but you see, from the analysis, we can see where practitioners are being more vocal about it and where their concerns are more evident. And it really kind of reveals not just where the pressure point lines, but where the momentum is building, right? There's a lot about the end of the life cycle of a product. What do we do with that? Why is it so vague on how we have to throw something away or recycle something? So these are the questions that are emerging a lot. Processes, we want processes that from start to end, they are traceable, but they are also true, right? In the sense that I don't want vague explanations on sustainability, but I want something more concrete. I want something that is verifiable, something that is measurable, and also I want something that even if I'm not seeing as an end consumer, so because I'm not there participating on the waste management, I want to be sure that whatever I'm doing has a positive impact, even in that part, which is the most crucial part, right? From this analysis, we see that the voices are aligning around this need for deeper, more accountable innovation. But of course, change is uneven, and of course, it's often fragmented. Now, with all that foundation in mind, we can now shift the focus to a specific trend that we have been monitoring on our platform, and it's called the enoughness era. Just a little bit of explanation about this trend. So basically, let's think about it, right? After decades of cultural obsession with endless growth and accumulation, we are seeing this really meaningful shift in consumer values. So more people are actually redefining what success, happiness, and having enough really mean. So they're taking their values and saying, you know what, maybe I was running towards something and that wasn't not even what I wanted. Or they are saying, you know, I'm happy with what I have. This is good enough. And it's not a pejorative way of seeing life. It's actually a very, intentional way of seeing life. In this new mindset, I would say contentment becomes the new aspiration, where more is no longer better, and intentionality, we are embracing it. Now, this is reflected in a growing focus on life satisfaction over performance metrics. And we see impact of that in several aspects of consumers' lives. There's a preference for curated simplicity over, overall overwhelming choices, and a rise in emotional connection over material value. We are also seeing tangible signals. There's, if you can see in the middle of the screen, we see a predicted increase in buy less behaviors, and also a rise in fashion-related repairability. So both those conversations, they point toward I would say, almost quieter, slower, but definitely more intentional consumer landscape. The enoughness era isn't just a passing mood, of course. It's a growing mindset, I would say. The trend has steadily gaining traction over the last years. We do see a 2024 showing a notable spike in activity and cultural relevance. And based on our predictions, the trajectory continues upward. We're seeing a projected growth of 14% over the next 12 months. Just to, kind of sum up a little bit the key ideas of this trend. First, we are witnessing a cultural, I would say, recalibration, where contentment and sufficiency are being embraced as valid goals. Yeah, we say, okay, having good enough, that's what I'm aiming for, and that's fine. And honestly, that's good. Second, we are seeing a shift that is calling for a new brand narrative. So people are moving away from materialism, status-based consumption, and they are, leaning instead toward simplicity, authenticity, emotional balance, self-worth. So in this climate, marketing that centers around this idea of good enough, they actually can be very powerful and resonate more than hyper aspirational ideals. And finally, we are seeing that buying decisions are being filtered through a deeper, I would say more personal lens, where meaning, emotional value, and long-term impact outweigh impulse and instant gratification. Those are some of the expressions that I've heard a lot, especially when COVID hit us. Instant gratification. There was this, revenge buying, and now we are seeing the relationship with objects being transformed, is changing. And we see this mindful consumption having a high impact in industries like home and interiors, but also fashion and accessories, and finally beauty and cosmetics. There are a few case studies that are really interesting to illustrate this trend. Let's begin with this powerful signal, I would say, of evolving consumer behavior, the TikTok's No Buy Challenge. So it emerged as a viral moment that transforms mindful restraint into aspirational practice, I would say. So participants, they commit to avoid non-essential purchases, so clothes, beauty products, even home decor, for a set period of time. It could be a month, it could be even a full year. And what began as a personal challenge is now part of a broader cultural wave, almost like a quiet rebellion against fast fashion and consumer pressure and lifestyles access. So simply by saying no to what I was talking about previously, impulse buying, instant gratification, this movement promotes intentional living, financial mindfulness. This is extremely important, financial mindfulness, because in the no buying challenge, not necessarily your motivations are sustainability. It might be budgeting, it might be financial mindfulness, it might be that you want to be a little bit more in control with your expenses. So it's a very it's a strong phenomenon, and it really aligns well with this idea of enoughness era. I'm not gonna buy something that I'm not in need. I will stick to what I have, and I will be very mindful with the choices that I do. But we are also seeing a wave of case studies that show how brands are beginning to respond, often in a bold and in unconventional way. But for example, The Ordinary, the skincare brand, for November, where usually you have Black Friday, they did something slightly different. They called it the Slow November. So instead of kind of fueling impulse buys with limited time offers, they closed both online and physical stores on that day. And rather, they extended a flat 23% discount for the entire month. So basically what what they said was, you don't need to rush just because it is discounted. We are extending the period, so you have a full time to understand if you really, really need it. Because if you need it, you'd still have the discount. But that day, that frenetic day, we're not going to open our doors, which is a very bold move. It's, if you think about it, if a brand say for a whole day I'm not going to sell anything, it's an extremely bold move, and it goes very in line with this consumer who says, okay, I need to take one step at a time. I need to think about what I'm doing. I want to go a little bit away from impulse buying. To close this set of case studies, I wanted to bring this case study from Burberry, and they did this recent project called Remake. And it kind of introduces a circular approach to kids wear. And I think it's interesting to think about child and baby care, because the life cycle, of course it reduced, right? Kids, they grow. So what happens to those clothes? And it's so common to see people kind of, passing from one family to another, different clothes. But what they did here is, first, of course, they are using surplus textiles here. So their claim is that whatever was meant to go away, to be thrown away, we're actually using it. And second, and I think this is the interesting part of the case study, they each piece features a multiple owners label. So basically you have a a label where you can write down the different parents that own that that cloth over time. And it's interesting to see how they are infusing this mindset. Basically, they're telling consumers our clothes are done with surplus. So we're doing what we can do with what usually would have just been thrown away. But second, I want you as a consumer to rethink how to approach this cloth. So you can write it down, but there's a life cycle that is not, it doesn't just stop in the second hand, but it could be a third, a fourth. It could have multiple lives. It's really interesting. Of course, I think cases like this, they emerged over the years in different scales. But I think if we put everything in context with the trend that we're looking at, and having a deeper reflection on how we are changing our relationship with the things that we own, it's really in line, because already from the moment I'm buying something, my approach, my relationship with that object is changed. Now, I would close this whole presentation with what's next for this enoughness era. The first one, the sustaining the shift. So the appeal of mindful consumption is growing, but we've seen it's vulnerable to backsliding. So brands and institutions, they really need to offer consistent, actionable support. Remember when I was talking about how maybe I want to be sustainable, but I don't have the means to be sustainable in a way that could be even economically sustainable for me? So introducing more solutions where sustainability can be actually achieved, and not, we actually give the tools to consumers to say, I can actually make this choice. I can afford this choice even. The second is awareness to agency. And this is very, very in line with what I just said. People know what's better, but there are real life tensions, and we need to kind of reconciliate with those as well. We need to think about how we can make consumers more empowered to actually take the step towards a more sustainable future. Third, less novelty, more meaning. This idea that consumers are embracing enough, the concept of enough, good enough. It really opens the doors for brands to focus less on constant reinvention, and more on lasting value. So instead of me chasing hypes and really fleeting trends, maybe if I'm embracing this enoughness mindset, I'll think about clothes as something that will have to stay with me longer. So something more timeless. So you see, if the more you think about it and you take the logical steps, you also can end up thinking about design. What happens when consumers are embracing the enoughness era? And finally, accessible labels. So transparency really cannot stay complex, has to be simpler, clearer, and even using digital tools like passports or even like impact scores that are easy to understand. They have to kind of bridge intention and action. And together, these shifts, they point to a deeper transformation in how we buy, how we live, but most importantly, how we relate to the things that we own. And with this, I guess we can, close the next chapter's part here.